I want to skip the Trump thing for now, and I want to go to who do you guys think should be on the 2028 ticket, or at least who do you think should be like in the primary?
Um, I just want to preface this by saying it is really way too early to speculate, but I think it's still a fun exercise. Um, but yeah, I mean, obviously the name with the most buzz right now is Gavin Newsom, but I think some other people that should be throwing their name in the hat include Gretchen Whitmer.
Mhm.
Um, Definitely think that Gretchen Whitmer would be someone that has a really great angle to play. Sanders at this point is probably a little bit too old. Um, I could totally see another progressive voice, um, you know, stepping into the contest. I don't necessarily think that would be a good thing. I don't think that a varied primary is ever really great news. The
What
last
primary?
time
Sorry.
an extremely like varied primary that has like very distinct ideologies represented. If there's like another like dogfight between progressives and moderates, I don't think it's going to go well for us. I think it's always bad to divide the base. I think it's if I will just say it's not good news that we don't already have an heir apparent to coalesce around.
Okay. What do you think,
Well,
Paul?
I think part of it is there's a lot of great upcoming rising stars in the Democratic Party, and I don't think it's necessarily the worst thing we don't have an heir apparent. But I do agree with pretty much every name Francisco mentioned. Newsom, Whitmer. I would throw Josh Shapiro in there, maybe Pete Buttigieg. Um, I could see Bashar running, even Warnock, um, and and from the progressive side, I mean, maybe even Ro Khanna. But uh, but yeah, it's way too early to tell. But there's a ton of names I would be happy with, and I think there's a lot of promise in the Democratic Party. Um, that the key will be the vibes, right? I mean, policy wise, there's a ton of promise. Um, we'll see, can they match the vibes of the incompetent American people? I don't know.
All right. Here's my three spicy takes. I think that we need to get more freaks in there. Okay. All right, because that's what's working for the Republicans. I think apparently the American electorate just they love a freak show. Okay, so we need to beg, get on our knees and fillet Jon Stewart until he runs because he says he would never run. Okay, we need to get that motherfucker in in a fucking campaign. Okay, Mark Cuban. I think we need to have our own billionaire, and AOC will be old enough to run, so she needs to run. Okay, we need to put them all in there. We need to have the widest. We need to cast the widest net possible. Okay, and we need not play kingmaker and just let the people choose and just run into the general with the most popular possible candidate with the best vibes. Okay, if we have to do 20 debates to get everyone to know everyone and have everyone kick everyone's ass for fucking ever, that's what we need to do. That's my opinion.
I'm not as triggered by your choices as you
As I
were
thought. Oh, I thought
setting
that.
me up to be.
Oh, okay. Yeah.
I get. I don't know what I was expecting, but
Oh,
not
okay.
that.
Okay. I told Noah he'd be super triggered with my picks. But yeah, I think that I don't disagree with any of your guys' picks, just to be super clear. Um, but yeah, I think that we need to vary. I think in hindsight, obviously, I think Hillary Clinton. Who's the? What is happening? Oh,
I'm not
somebody.
hearing anything.
So, oh, I think Isaiah's emoting in the chat. But yeah, I think that Hillary Clinton fucked us in 2016 because she was like she was like the it was the beginning of the Fives era, and she was the most possible the most corporate possible candidate. Like we kind of alluded to earlier that she was just like corporately cringe, right? And I think since then we've just struggled to have a permanent candidate, like an 8-year candidate. stop. Um, and I think that yeah, since then, yeah, I don't know. What do you guys think about that? Like, I think because Biden was supposed to be is Francisco the one putting the text in chat? Who's
I think
doing
it's
it?
Francisco.
Oh, oh my god.
Okay, I hear what you're saying, and yeah, I mean it's unfortunate. Biden, if he was only like a term earlier, he could have done the full 8.
Yeah, if he
But
ran in 2016, I think he might have beaten Trump. I think literally the only person who wouldn't have beaten Trump was fucking Hillary Clinton.
well, yeah, it's hard to say. It's hard to say because Trump was such an unknown at that time.
Yeah.
But
Yep. And then he was supposed to be
uh,
he was supposed to be a
Yeah, I mean, I would agree strongly that I think Biden would have beaten Trump in 2016. He had the appeal of white working class blue collar voters in the Rust Belt, and that's all. That was the difference. Where Hillary was the worst possible person to put in front of them. But it was her turn, and
yeah,
paid the price as a
not even it
nation.
was her turn. She got the most votes.
Yeah, I mean, I don't know. I think that Biden deliberately not running, there was definitely internal party politics that had to do with that because Biden wanted to run in 2016. That's established, but didn't, largely to get out of Hillary's way.
Yep, he should have ran, and Obama should have been like, "You're going to be the next president," and then he would have been the next president. Yeah, but yeah,
well,
I think
as
that
as far as your picks, Davin, I mean, I'm not sure if I'd really be super in favor of any of them, but probably Jon Stewart would be the one I would be most sympathetic to. I'm not really like into the whole like, oh, let's match our billionaire with their billionaire. Even though I think Mark Cuban has some good messaging for Democrats, and if anything, maybe they could have played more into his messaging, but I think the whole billionaire thing can be a bad look. As far as AOC, I do think she would be definitely alienating to a lot of the country with her being like on the more left-leaning side of Congress. I mean, I think she's become a really good congressperson. She's gonna have a really great career, as she's found a way to work with the party in ways a lot of her other squad members and people in that field like are unwilling to do. And I think that's awesome for the country. But I think her as a Democratic nominee would I just think there's too much of the country that wouldn't even consider someone of her political predispositions.
Yeah.
I understand. I agree with you guys. Okay, I'm sorry, I totally cut you off, Francisco.
No, I was just saying I strongly agree with Noah. I think like even though, like I said, I'm a little bit more sympathetic to her positions than Noah is. I think I come to the same conclusion in the sense that even if I would be fully energized by someone like AOC, I think that it's the plain reality in America in the 20s right now is that most of the country would never get behind a candidate like that, and whether or not someone thinks that's regrettable, I guess is down to the individual. I personally think it is, but of course, I mean, I strongly agree with Noah. I think she's doing good things. I really respect her willingness to challenge the system and to call established paradigms into question, but she's a little bit ahead of her time, in my opinion.
What do you think about a Jon Stewart?
I don't know. I haven't really heard of that. I'm not sure how much I buy the idea that us putting on our own theatrical candidate is the best antidote to Trump.
I will interject
I mean,
and say Stewart is my real pick because he actually understands how the fucking government works and understands policy and could be a competent president. Oh, yeah.
I don't know enough about him and his like political positions. I mean, I guess I would need to read it into that a little bit more, but um, I think I mean I've seen him, owning conservatives on podcasts and everything, but I mean that there's a big difference I think between that and becoming a marketable candidate that people will take seriously. Just because I think that there's a different standard for the Democrats than there is for the Republicans. The Republicans will vote for um, anything that you know that the member berries are telling them, right? But the Democrats have a much higher standard and much more integrity, a much higher capacity for nuance and for reason. And even though it's largely normal people who may not have as firm of a grip on policy and the way the government works, who decide the general election, I think in the primaries it's a very different game. And um, the DNC and donors and specific demographics make a really big difference in the primary in a way that they don't in the general. And it was in the general we're appealing to the median voter. In the primaries, we're appealing to the widest net we can cast across the base. And in a base, that represents a Democratic Party, I don't think you're. I think that the person who is a representative for us is going to have to be someone maybe with a more established public policy record. But I don't know. I may be wrong. I hope I'm wrong. If he's the person that can beat Trump, then God bless him. Godspeed.
Yeah, I think that our issue right now is we're having a problem where like people are like AOC was like looking at like the ballot count, and she destroyed in her district obviously, but Trump did really well in her district surprisingly, and she was like, how could you vote for me and Trump on the same ballot? That doesn't make sense. It's just like she didn't want to say this is a stupid thing to do, but her face said it all, right? And I think, and people were saying, well, you're real, I don't want to support like the establishment and da 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 da. So like, I think we need more of these people that like don't represent the establishment, because
Well,
people don't understand that there's two ways to not represent the establishment, right? And one of them is the left leaning people, and one of them is right leaning people, and I guarantee you both of them would like the establishment more than each other, right?
well, I'm not sure how predictive that will be for most of the country, or even a significant part of the country, because I mean her district, I can't remember which district it is in New York, but I do know that her district is extremely far left. The real election in her district is the Democratic primary. After that, whoever that is wins every single
That
time.
apparently also happened in Michigan too. Like,
Yeah.
pretty bad.
And so in that district, you're dealing with one of the most extreme left groups voter bases of like anywhere in the country. And I don't know how well that can predict a bigger election, because are those people who voted for her and then voted for Trump, or just stayed home and didn't vote? I mean, are they? You could make the argument they're so left wing that they're not willing to vote for anyone who's not AOC or more left.
Okay. Yeah, that's fair. Again, this is the people that should
Yeah.
be in the primary. This is like a discussion of people we should throw into the primary, into the meat grinder, right? Not who we think should be
Mm-hmm.
the nominee. I think the nominee should
Yeah.
be whoever the most people vote for. Like that's right.
Yeah.
Yeah. Um, yeah. But I think we need more. We need more like non-normal choices. I would say. If nothing other than to make it look like we are willing to listen to you when you say you don't like the establishment or something.
I guess like what I keep coming back to is it's not like the Democratic Party. It's not like we're strangers to candidates like that. I mean, when Marianne Williamson ran and she was talking about dark spirits and dark energies, like that didn't generate any buzz at all. Not that Stewart or AOC would ever be that silly. I just think that, like I said, there's a higher benchmark for
Absolutely.
Yeah,
who a Democrat.
and we had our own billionaire run in 2020. What Tom Steyer, and that's what was his
No,
thing.
yeah, him and freaking Bloomberg ran.
Yeah,
And
Bloomberg too. Tom Steyer and Bloomberg were both. I mean, Bloomberg really like his only claim to fame was just being rich.
Right, but
Tom Steyer had a little more like activism background, but
I mean, something else there that's also important to consider is just like the specific and unique political climate. And unique is a word I don't like to use lightly because in truth, there are very few things in the world that are unique. But there was a unique political environment. We were in the midst of a global pandemic and the worst public health emergency in our history. And in the middle of the George Floyd riots, where our country was more open to radical civil rights discourse than at any other point, preceding that and any other point since, because the George Floyd buzz dissipated pretty quickly after 2020. The calls to defund the police have been soundly and firmly rejected across the Democratic Party. But you got to remember, in 2020, that wasn't happening. That was not happening. You had not just politicians, but political commentators and influencers across the Democratic space that were having those kinds of conversations. There was a general feeling that it was time to give African Americans, specifically radical civil rights activists, and I'm not using radical as a pejorative there. I'm simply just acknowledging the fact that there is a more I guess I would call it what's the word? There is a space within civil rights discourse that is more willing to openly and explicitly reject what the United States stands for as a country at its very foundation, concerning its foundational principles, because of the legacy of slavery, because of the legacy of Jim Crow, because of the legacy of this idea that Black people in this country have never been treated equally and have never been treated fairly. And I mean, I don't align with those people. I believe it's a much more pessimistic view than we should have. But I will just say that at that time, Bloomberg was in a really poor position to be running, because this was a time when we needed someone that either embodied those ideals or had a track record of embodying those ideals, which, as much as the Republicans were peddling all this disinformation about how Biden used to be in the KKK and all this other bullshit that nobody ever proved, it was all just like it was just the same QAnon Pizzagate bullshit. Biden does have a significant rapport with the Black community and a history of effective policy. And it's like people would point out the crime bill. The crime bill, I mean, at the time when it was passed, it was fully endorsed by the Congressional Black Caucus. It was not a.
It was one of the most popular pieces of congressionally
Yeah.
popular pieces of legislation ever, right?
Exactly.
Almost everyone voted yes on it. Yeah.
And
Yeah,
the
exactly.
piece that Biden was most crucial in developing from that bill was the violence against women piece of the bill. That was the main thing. It wasn't the drug issues with the bill that have become more controversial.
And something else that I think is very important is there was a time in this country where there was a great reluctance to criticize the apartheid regime in South Africa. And Biden, you can find videos on YouTube, right now. You can go on and find him. I think it's the Foreign Relations Committee. It might be the Arms Committee or whatever that committee's called. But where he is passionately rebuking South Africa and advocating for total divestment. And he was largely singled out for that. And, that played a role as well in outreach to the African American community. Nowadays we live in a time where, it's pretty taboo to criticize anything Israel does. But you have people that are willing to say something for the first time ever, really. But yeah, I mean, my point is that Biden was ahead of his time as it pertains to apartheid South Africa, in much the same way that I think Bernie Sanders is ahead of his time now in his willingness to criticize Israel. But I think that, yeah, I mean, Biden had a lot going for him at the perfect moment, as the George Floyd stuff was at its peak, while the public health emergency was at the forefront of everyone's minds and destroying and killing so many people. So yeah, I think that the environment was just right, but we can't count on that, and we need someone that's going to be more versatile. And I'm not sure that like this like silly candidate is going to be able to capture that.
Yeah, I just also think these three people are competent, right? So like Mark Cuban, like he talks about policy. He goes on podcasts and talks shit to people all the time. Like he clearly has some understanding of policy, right? And he seems like he also runs his companies like competently. He's not one of those billionaires who like starts a bunch of businesses and only makes money when he rips people off. Hint, hint on who I might be talking about. um, yeah, I mean, he
Yeah.
made a thing called cost plus drugs, and the only thing that does is they make generic versions of drugs for as cheap as possible, so that they can sell to people. They can undersell like the expensive versions of them, right? So he's like
Cool.
helping people a lot, right? And, yeah. So yeah, I mean, he's a smart guy. I trust him to surround himself with a bunch of experts, right? So yeah, I think you should hop in. Okay. Will he win? Probably not. It's probably going to be Gavin Newsom who gets the nomination. Okay. And we need to feed Gavin Newsom all like he needs to come in and have just malice in his heart. Okay. I think that's the if he's too nice, he just comes off as this like corporate weenie. We need him to like channel the same energy he gave Meatball Ron in their debate the entire campaign. Okay, he like you know how like Trump is only popular because he owned the libs. We need to own the cons. Okay, that's what we own the cons the entire fucking campaign. That's what the Gavin Newsom needs to. That's how he gets through a general. That's my personal opinion.
I agree. I think he needs to be aggressive and take initiative. Not that he's not doing that, but
Yeah. I'm definitely going to be looking for a lot of these people we're watching to be nominees and how they handle the first 2 years of the Trump presidency in their positions of government. And I'm hopeful that they're going to fight against him as hard as humanly possible, and do everything they can to stymie every little thing he's doing. So we'll see.
Yeah, I think that yeah, like yeah, I think that again, Gavin Newsom has the potential to be a really good candidate or a really bad candidate. I think that we're past the point in which a corporate candidate can win. Okay, and sometimes he does come off as a corporate candidate, and we need to not do that. Luckily, we have most of the homeless people, so and we're gonna vote for him no matter what. Um, but yeah, he really doesn't like homeless people, and that's not good. Uh, um, yeah, I think clearing out the homeless encampments in LA, but personally helping clear out the homeless encampments in LA is like not a good look, you know. But I don't know.
probably yeah. For I mean, it's a complicated question because for progressives, yeah, not a good look. But I think that for appealing to the median voter, I think that someone like Gavin Newsom probably prioritizes pretty heavily, um, proving that liberal cities are not these like cesspools of homelessness and drug use and whatever. And so I think that the because that's one of the most effective um, talking points that the MAGAs have. And unfortunately, yeah, the situation largely created by the housing crisis in this country is appalling, and that in of itself is in large part because people can't afford to buy a home. And well, why can't people afford to buy a home? Well, because the wages have not kept up with the pace of living costs, and really it's down to economics. But that's not a calculation that most people are going to make.
Yeah, I mean, people don't understand. Like, if you look at the minimum wage increase, no one voted to increase them, or I guess it was close, but people didn't vote to increase the minimum wage in California, and that's not going to help anybody, right?
Yeah.
And on top of that, like we also voted for no bonds for building more housing. So I don't know what people fucking expect. The only two ways, increase spending power or increase housing supply, are the only two real ways to drop home values, right? But fuck me, I guess. I'm just informed.
Uh,
Hmm?
Yeah, the bonds for low-income housing not passing that hurts. That hurts.
Yep, that's because
Minimum wage could still win though.
it can still win.
It's a 1 point gap. Well, 49 to 51, so 2 point gap. 93% of the votes in.
Oh,
So
shit.
it could go either way, I'm thinking.
Yeah, I'm hoping that that passes. I mean, I think that whatever we decide the minimum wage is, we need to permanently tie it to inflation after that.
Well, it is currently actually. This would just boost it. This bill or this prop would keep it tied to inflation, but boost it up and base its inflationary increase on a new base level.
Okay, sweet. That's fine.
Yeah.
Okay. Yeah, I was worried that like it was like not gonna get renewed, like the inflation increase was not gonna get renewed. Yeah, that's good. The idea that like no one ever tied it to inflation is kind of silly to me.
Yeah, and that's the problem with the federal minimum wage and why I mean, there's problems with California's minimum wage, even though it is tied to inflation. But that's why the federal minimum wage is such a disaster.
yeah, I mean, up here in Washington State, the measure to repeal the capital gains tax, it failed by like a lot.
That's good.
Yeah, there was also, yeah, I mean, these trends, I mean, even across blue states are not hard to predict, but
Mm-hmm.
I mean, I think that the thing about it is a lot of people um, like to say they're progressive, and then when it comes down to it, they're not. When they get in the voter booth and it's anonymous, they're the first people to be like, yeah, fuck those homeless motherfuckers. Okay? These progressive people, a lot of them, like just like with the end the slavery thing in California, when we're ending slave labor in prisons, okay? They get in that booth and they're like, yeah, rehabilitative justice is great. We love rehabilitative justice. No one should be enslaved. And they get in there and then they think of the worst crime. They think of like the worst crime they can think of. And they're like, yeah, actually, fuck that guy. I hope that guy's a fucking slave, you know? And that's not good. That's what we would call bad. They're not living their principles. Okay, if you're not really willing to like make sure that the worst criminal you know is being rehabilitated, like you don't believe in rehabilitative justice. You just like to virtue signal about it.
And you can still vote for these changes even if you don't think it is slavery. I definitely don't think there's a good argument that that would be slavery, but I still think it's a really bad policy and it's not in coordination with legislative intent, and it should absolutely be changed. And work should be compensated fairly if a prisoner chooses to do it.
Yep, absolutely.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah. Um, I also think that strategically, Democrats, whoever thinks they're about to run for president, okay, actually any Democrat, I changed my mind, any Democrat who has any constituency in the United States, okay, anytime someone suggests something that's going to help a red constituency, your answer is no. Okay, there's a hurricane going on in Florida. Oh, you want extra FEMA funds? Fuck you. Okay, let the Republicans help you. I think that we need to stop bailing out Republicans when they vote in Republicans. All right, you want Republicans
Well,
to govern you? Have fucking fun. Bye bye. Okay,
yeah,
have fun with the hurricane.
yeah. I know that's a hard ass stance, and I've always been proud to be from a state like California and other states like California, like New York and stuff like that, that are very left leaning states that have then the states that keep the welfare queen states, like Oklahoma, Alabama, Kentucky, you name it, alive. They we fund their lives there, because their economy, due to their extreme right-wing governments, are in shambles. But I've definitely starting to lean more to your side of how to handle this, down, and where I think you need to say fuck them at this point, because as long as blue states keep lessening the blow of their horrible electoral choices, they will not, they will not have any negative repercussions, or not enough negative repercussions to realize what they're voting for is disastrous.
I mean, isn't it out of our hands though most of the time?
No, we give California gives way more to the federal government than it takes in. I think it's like a $375 billion surplus that we
Well,
give.
a lot
No,
of
no,
that is
I know
just
that,
in federal taxes, right?
but like, I mean, how the taxes we pay to the federal
Yeah.
government, it's not like we can like choose whether or not we pay them.
No, there are certain funds that California does give to the federal government that Gavin Newsom's talking about withholding.
There's that but you're right, Francisco, that a lot of the money just comes from federal taxes, and there's no way to stop that.
Yeah.
But there are, especially when it comes to disaster relief, individual states will send resources, first responder teams, things like that's in their surplus in stock to these states that can't handle the disaster. So those are other areas that,
I see.
maybe it's time to start considering, do we go help a Florida, who is, voted for a man who's trying to destroy democracy? I don't know.
Well,
So yeah, I think
go.
I would be curious to know about what percentage of the funds come from these programs that Newsom is planning on saying no to, because if it's a drop in the bucket, I mean, I don't really think it's going to reach the level of desired impact where we're sending a message and people feel the effects and are like, holy shit, we got to stop voting for these people because they're not doing anything for us. But yeah, I don't know. I'm like,
I also don't think that, like, if in theory there's something that every blue state already has state laws for, right? That's protected, right? And red states don't have a state law to protect them for. Let's say it's like some labor law or whatever that fucks over workers, right? And don't suggest anything nationally. We already got our shit covered. Don't fix it until a Democrat's has the presidency. Purposely leave problems unsolved, okay? Because this just became a giant trolley problem. Because if the Republicans get a supermajority, we're fucked. The states can't protect themselves, okay? We can't protect our citizens of our states if they get a supermajority. They can just start like passing constitutional amendments or reversing constitutional amendments, and we're just at their mercy.
I mean, yeah, the really huge problem fundamentally is also just like the structure of the Senate. It's almost undemocratic the way that it concentrates power and distributes representation. I mean, Wyoming has, I think it's like 18 times more representation than California.
I actually disagree with you. I think the Senate's the best one. I think that the worst one is the cap on the House, because the House is supposed to be the one that's like representative of population. I think the fact that the House is capped is insane. And then the Electoral College I don't think is very good either, but it's not as bad as the cap on the House.
The reason I think that the Senate structure needs to change is mostly in terms of appointments, because the thing is that regardless of what regardless of whatever constitutional principle is in place, which, at the time it made more sense. Nowadays, just because of the obvious difference in the demographics, it doesn't make sense that a group of less than 1 million people in one of the least educated states that consistently votes for some of the most abhorrent policies in the nation gets to put 2 representatives on Capitol Hill, while the collective will of 40 million people is represented by the same amount. And, in that sense, they are voting on things that are directly affecting our rights. The House not, confirm Supreme Court justices. The House does not vet agency appointments. And it is precisely because of this that I think that the Senate should also have proportional representation. I agree that it should have larger districts, but I don't know if it really is just politically feasible for this to continue, because you're going to keep. The fact that we have to battle the Republicans for this. The fact that we have to battle the Republicans for influence in the Senate is always going to be a major hurdle, and often, the obstacle that kills any effort to pass common sense, life-changing legislation, largely because a significantly smaller minority of people are dictating that. So I think that the Senate's construction definitely needs to change.
Okay, I see that point. I think my main point to keeping the Senate is that there's this idea that, like, before we pass national legislation, every state should have some amount of say into if it passes, right? Versus just like with the House drafting the bill, it's just like it is the proportion of the population, right, is really what determines what goes to the Senate to get voted on, right? So it's kind of the filter to make sure that, like, us city folk don't destroy these urban or these rural areas with our city legislation or whatever. I don't know. Yeah.
I would also love to see the Supreme Court someday revisit the landmark ruling that, I don't know if you remember what it was. No, I don't remember it. We learned about it last year, and I think it was I think we mentioned it in both Con Law and in Civ Pro, where it was like the Supreme Court determined, a much more liberal court than the one in place today, mind you, determined that gerrymandering is not unconstitutional.
Yeah.
Which I would love to see the court reinterpret that, because have you seen like a map of Texas's districts? It's insane. It's criminal.
We looked at
It is deliberate.
We looked at Illinois at work the other day, and there's one that is like this giant weird U shape.
Yeah. It is deliberate voter suppression. Yeah. And I think the sooner that we as a nation learn to recognize that, the better off we're all going to be.
Yeah, I think that the district should be a lot more squarish. I know that, like, sounds bad. A lot of people are like, well, you need to gerrymander because you wanna get all the Latinos in the same district, and it's like, why? Who cares? We're all supposed to be Americans, okay? Like, why? We don't need a district that's just Latinos, okay? We need everyone to get along.
I agree.
Yeah.
I agree.
All right, they're a majority of the country now, officially, okay?
Never even heard anybody say that, but I think that's absolutely absurd.
Yeah,
because they're forgetting the main purpose of voting, which is to, derive substantial and impactful public policy from our representatives. And I think having a district that is Latino just for the hell of it, I think is those people don't have their priorities straight, if that's what they're actually saying.
I agree with you. Okay. I'm also, as a mixed person, just don't like. I don't think that idea, like the idea of just like having a representative that just represents the Latino people in your state, has any value. Okay, so you can draw a big fucking spiral shape in your state, so you can get all the neighborhoods with just the Latino people.
Yeah, if we lived in a parliamentary system, that would make sense, but we don't. And
no.
I'm sure if we had a parliamentary system, there would be a Latino party. But honestly, given how fragmented opinion is, even in that community, I don't even know if it would make sense to have a Latino party. I don't know who the hell would vote for it either. I think it's just so dumb. What is a policy that we universally agree on? I don't think that there's anything at this point, because there are even like Latinos that are absurdly racist against other Latinos. So it just doesn't. The Obama coalition, as I like to call it, I think is on its last legs.
Yep, I got you. I don't disagree with that. I think that the gerrymandering is insane. I'm just like trying to think about it. Like, yeah, and then the cap on the House is it's such an egregious fucking like breach of like the spirit of the Constitution, in my opinion. Like the whole point of the House was to be proportional to the population. Like what the fuck, right?
Yeah, there needs to be more House members, because even with the smaller states having only one rep, they're still being overrepresented in the House.
Yeah.
Oh yeah, dude. Like seriously, like if you literally just gave Wyoming one rep, there is no like mathematical proportion that is going to give California the representation it needs. I keep picking on Wyoming only just because it's like I think one of the smallest or the smallest state in terms of population, but it's absurd.
Yeah.
I mean, land doesn't
Yeah.
vote. Land doesn't vote. Land doesn't vote for all the fucking idiots on my Facebook feed posting that stupid ass graphic from all these MAGA pages
I know.
that has like it's like I'm like you cannot possibly be that ignorant, but I guess you are.
Dude,
And
that
I mean
graphic circulates every election cycle with like the most of the counties being red. It drives me fucking crazy.
I'm just like you're an imbecile. I can't contain my frustration.